Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome to a special one-off video on, well, the F1 2022 car launch liveries. Now, quick note on this one, there's one absent livery at this point in time, and there's a bonus one. We've had all of the car launches prior to testing in Barcelona, except one. They gave us a false launch, and that is Alfa Romeo. We will go with the false launch version, and we'll get that one out of the way first. But let me also state that, first off, this is entirely my opinion. We're using a tier list here to rank how I see the F1 2022 liveries. For a separate look into my way too early predictions before the cars have actually seen the track, check that one out tomorrow, as that should be coming pretty soon. Now, this is coming from an F1 fan. However, as an American, F1 really wasn't present in the US. There was very, very little behind it. Now, I grew up basically learning how to drive from a PlayStation 2 F1 game back in the mid 90s. I want to say F1 96. And so I knew of F1 and I was casually a fan of F1, but there was zero coverage of it until this last decade. In which case, I have watched every race of the last decade. I've been a fan for a decade of the sport. And I know that that is much shorter than so many others, but that's definitely long enough now that I'm certainly not a bandwagon fan by any means. And in fact, I waited a full decade before I truly got behind any one team or any one driver. That being said, that just happened in the last year. So there is some inherent bias in my view, my opinion of these. But you know what? That's enough of an introduction. Let's go ahead and get started with that false Alfa Romeo. And we're going to go straight to the garbage bin with it. Now, if you have not seen the Alfa Romeo livery, well, it's kind of hideous, depending on your view. My view is, as a Army veteran, my view is that camouflage belongs on military uniforms and nowhere else. It doesn't belong anywhere else, and it just does not fit. It does not look good on a race car. So sorry, it's going straight to the bin for me. Moving on from there, let's go to the one that is completely unchanged. Let's go to the Haas, and I'm going to go with not a fan. Why? Well, for one, it's a Russian flag on an American team. I understand that Gene Haas was reluctant to continue in F1 after the way things had deteriorated. They weren't going well. He really wasn't a fan of sticking around. But then some money came along, and the direction, the angle of that money was heavily Russian influenced and Russian backed, and feels more like a Russian team due to the livery and at least one of those two drivers driving for them who shall go unnamed. He is the Voldemort of F1 these days. But yeah, I just not a fan of how it looks. Haas have had actually a couple really nice liveries in my opinion. And while their previous livery to this version that of course they've first adopted last year, I kind of liked the old one where many didn't. This though, just not a fan. Not a fan. White in general is not a good look for me as a soccer player, amateur soccer player, who we have a team jersey, but we often have to have black or white jerseys as that fallback if there's clashing colors with opposition. Hate having to don the white. Just not a fan of it. Moving up to could be better status, I'm going with the Red Bull. Why? Because it's the same look. You know, Red Bull sponsors a lot of different athletes or sports teams or auto racing teams. They sponsor so many. And the vast majority of them manage to put out new looks year after year after year. Now, I understand that the Red Bull logo is going to be something that is unchanged. That is iconic. That is stationary. That part you keep. But why they have maintained the same livery year after year after year after year after year, I'm over it. I'm definitely over it. Now, does it look good by itself? Yes. I accept that. But I'm over it. Everybody else is managing to change things up. I'm criticizing Haas for not changing things up just a year after they changed it up. Of course, I'm going to criticize Red Bull for keeping the identical livery with no change to it year after year after year. Well, we might be absent one with the Alfa Romeo, but of course we had a replacement for that. We have a bonus with the Alpines. Let's start with the bonus livery, which is only going to be used for the two first races of this year, and that is the pink Alpine. And I'm actually pretty okay with it, but I'm somewhere in between could be better and pretty okay. I'm going to go with pretty okay because, well, for one, unlike many others, I don't mind the pink. I'm going to go ahead and put it in could be better for one reason. That reason being that this pink livery, outside of the blue Alpine at the back of it, this is a very familiar livery. Very familiar. Too familiar. Now, of course, it's because of the sponsorship. The new BWT sponsorship that Alpine has picked up means that they've donned that blue and pink that comes from BWT. But because of it, it looks like Racing Point. It looks like another team's livery of just a few years ago. Now, I get that you're adopting the same sponsor that they used to have, as they have moved on to be fully sponsored by Aston Martin. While they went in another direction, the Alpine has reverted to something old that wasn't even theirs. And therefore, even though I don't mind it, and I say that the look of it to me is pretty okay, I have to knock it down for being unoriginal. For the blue livery, I'm seeing social media actually give it a fair bit of hate here in the first few hours after that launch. And while I'm on the edge of pretty okay and looking good, I'm going to give it just enough of a nudge to put it in looking good. I think they have found a good blend between the blue and pink. A pretty solid blend between the blue and pink. Not the easiest to blend, but they've made it work. I like the blue touch on it. And I, unlike many others, I do like pink. I'm perfectly okay with pink, at least the right pink. And I think they've made this work. So I'm going to go with looking good on the Alpine, though I know many others are probably not going to agree with me. I think a lot of people are going to have this all the way down in not a fan. But I'm okay. I'm pretty content with putting it just above pretty okay into the looking good category. Now, going into the Mercedes, this was a team that I was fairly ho-hum about, and as a perennial winner, I, like so many others, was hitting a point where I kind of wanted to see some others win. But the more that I learned about the history of the sport, the more I learned about the history of the drivers, the more I learned about who they were as people and not just how they were on the racetrack, the more I came to respect Mercedes and eventually become a fan of Lewis Hamilton and the team and what they're trying to do. And more started to root for them, especially this last year, as I saw the opposite in terms of morals, in terms of on-track behavior, in terms of off-track behavior from, well, others. And the more I learned about Lewis Hamilton and his efforts to stand for something that he believed in, I loved the black livery of the last couple of seasons. And I'm really sad to see it go. However, the silver arrows, it's still beautiful. But I'm going to bump this from looking good down to pretty okay as my statement of support for the black livery and what it stands for, especially living in not the only nation that suffers from racism, but the one that arguably suffers the worst from it. Car by itself, though, does look pretty good. Now, where I said that Red Bull doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same results, just doesn't work for me, AlphaTauri does mix it up. They take the same sponsorship, but they do mix up what they do. And I appreciate that AlphaTauri makes that effort. And for that, they're absolutely going higher up the list. And I'm right there when it comes to saying that it looks good. There's a little too much white for me. I don't think they necessarily have the right blue, and or is that gray? And for that, I'm just going to put it down on pretty okay, but definitely above the Mercedes in my opinion. Now, as we approach the final four for this list, I'll tell you now that all of these are falling into the upper tiers. Where they fall, though, well, that's yet to be decided. I think the only easy decision here is that even though I do not like Ferrari as a team, I like the drivers that they have right now, but I really do not like Ferrari. I really do not like how, for so many years, Ferrari did the same thing as Red Bull. They kept it the same. They wouldn't change. They wouldn't adapt. But they have. Now, their first win for me is eliminating Mission Win Now, aka Marlboro, as a sponsor. They've gone in a positive direction. They've made a positive change. I actually liked the green that came with the Mission Win Now logo and didn't mind it. A lot of people always said that was the worst piece. They loved the livery, but they didn't like that piece. I wasn't a fan of the livery. But this year, oh, they got it right. If looks could win races, the Ferrari would win a championship. And that's a pretty easy decision. Even though I'm not a fan of Ferrari, I love the livery. I think it looks great. Deciding between the other three on what's the next best, that's a harder decision. I think all of them are going to fall above the Alpine, or at least I expect them to as I go through and make my comparisons. But which one's second, third, which one rounds out the podium? Tougher to say. I think I'm going to go with the one that would easily be a podium pick based on social media. But for me, just missing. Just. I like it, but it's just missing out. And going into looking good, though above the Alpine, for me is Aston Martin. I like the yellow touch. The highlights of yellow are good. And a lot of people have said likewise that they really like that yellow trim on there. For me, though, the green, not quite right. Not quite right, a little too solid. And green's my favorite color. I like the Aston Martin. I liked last year better than this year's. It's good. Absolutely looks good. And it's almost a work of art. But not quite. Not quite. I think they could do a little bit better. But they're pretty on it. For me, the last two, I'm going to go straight into work of art for the Williams and the McLaren. Which one, though, for second and third? Here's the thing. The McLaren has been pretty well received, and I think most people would have the McLaren and the Aston Martin on their podium, where the Ferrari is a very popular pick for best livery this year. So the McLaren seems an easy choice. The Williams, for some reason, year after year, for quite a few seasons now, has not been well received. In fact, I've seen a lot of hate directed at Williams for quite a few seasons now. Now, here is where I have a little bit of bias put into this decision making. I'm a fan of underdogs. I rarely support the favorite in anything. That's one big reason why I didn't adopt Mercedes for 9 of 10 years. I didn't jump on the bandwagon. I didn't jump on the Red Bull or Ferrari bandwagon that so many others take. The team that can beat the best team but isn't the best team because they don't want to see the dominance. They want to see somebody else win. They don't like seeing the same one win all the time. Blah, blah, blah. You know, that spiel that so many have given. No, I like a true underdog. And the Williams are absolutely that. They were the powerhouse, but they were falling out. They were the private team playing with less money compared to everybody else that found a way to succeed. They've got a great story. They've got an absolute great story. And they are and remain an underdog. And even with Darlington Capital coming in and taking over the team, they've retained Williams. And that's important for me. That's really important for me. They've maintained the namesake. I really liked the driver lineup last year. I like Albon. Latifi is pretty decent. I'm a William, George Russell fan, so seeing Williams succeed is something I want. And for that, I think I've always had a little more. I like it because I like the team. I find a way to like it. So, yes, there very well could be some of that happening here. But beyond that, I like what they've done. I like what they've done with the new car. The predominantly blue, the mixture of shades of blue, the diamond shaping on the back. I think it's good. And where so many complained over the toothpaste of previous seasons, over the, well, at least it's not toothpaste, but I still hate it, of last season. This year, I think it is a solid step in the right direction, and it definitely qualifies for work of art. That being said, the McLaren, it is just that little bit better. So yes, I go with McLaren for my second favorite, Williams third favorite. That's my liveries for this year and where I rank them. Please tune in as I will be putting out my predictions for the season based solely on the look of the cars. No, not the liveries. I don't think the livery makes a car go fast or slow, even though there, of course, was that argument about the paint way back in, what was that, the late 50s or was it the early 60s, where Mercedes first adopted the silver paint because the absence of paint made the car quicker. Yes, less weight on the car. They realized that much. But no, this is not that type of ranking. I'm going to make predictions based on the aerodynamics and what we know about the engines of the cars, what we know about drag, so on and so forth. What I expect to see of the quality of the structure of the teams, their pit crews, so on and so forth, and make some predictions for the season. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.